All right, hi everyone. Good to see you out there. Welcome to my channel. My name is Thomas, and I do educational videos. We're going to get right into video 71 on the reciprocal system of theory, and I believe this is video number 49 on his final book that's called Beyond Space and Time. Larson was a kind of a mining engineer, and he was working on some side projects in his life back in the 20s and 30s, and he kind of stumbled across some ideas, worked them out over the next 20 years while keeping his day job, and eventually put out his fundamental postulates, and then on the heels of those postulates wrote many books on physics and astrophysics, chemistry, astronomy, and basically a theory of everything. And his final book is called Beyond Space and Time, and that's the one we're looking at. It came out posthumously after his death in 1990. This book came out, I think, in 1995. And the main postulate is that the universe is not made out of matter, and it's not made out of energy, but it is made out of motion. And motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time are the same in that they are reciprocals of each other. That's basically implied in a ratio or a relationship. It's a fraction. The reciprocal of 3 is 1/3. 3 over 1, and the reciprocal is 1 over 3. And that is, like time over space, space over time. And so the qualities of both space and time adhere to each other. So what we know about space is that it has multidimensional, we'll just say 3 dimensions, X, Y, Z coordinates, up to the right and forward. Those are the XYZ coordinates. They're all at 90-degree angles to each other. And that's what we know about space. And so those qualities also occur in time. So time can be thought of as being 3-dimensional like that. Time, what we know about time is that it's always progressing. It's always getting later and later and later, the flow of time. And so we also know then by the reciprocal relation that space has those qualities also, the flow of space. Things are always getting further and further apart. And that can be seen in the Hubble telescope's recession that observed the recession of the distant galaxies. All of the galaxies are moving away from each other. The further away from each other they are, the faster they're moving. In the same way that if you took a balloon and you put a bunch of dots on it with a magic marker and you blew up the balloon, all of the dots would be moving away from each other. And the further away from each other they were, the faster they would be moving apart. And in the same way, if you sucked in the balloon, then they would all be moving toward each other. And the further that they were away, the faster they would be moving toward each other. And so that is the other part is that space and time are both quantized, meaning that there is a minimum unit of time and there is a minimum unit of space. 1 unit, there's nothing less than 1. Everything is in 1 unit increments, and 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, space over time, that's speed, 60 miles per hour, for example. But 1 unit of space over 1 unit of time is the speed of light. So in Larson's system, the speed of light is really like the neutral point, whereas Einstein says that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe. Larson says it's the neutral point, and there's an entire half of the universe that's moving faster than the speed of light. And Larson refers to that as the cosmic sector, or sector 2. Sector 1 is the normal sector that we're familiar with, and he calls that the material sector, or sector 1, that is moving slower than the speed of light. Sector 1, grows by aggregation. Things pile up on each other, stick to each other, and eventually you get to the most complicated aggregation of matter, and that's the DNA molecule, which has a few billion atoms in it. And at that point, the DNA molecule becomes eligible to be taken control over by a sector 2 component. So, and then that is what Larson calls the life unit. So there's a DNA that is not under the control of a life unit, that is inanimate, DNA. But DNA can be activated or brought to life through a control unit. And then these life units can become more and more complex and develop over time, and eventually get to their most complicated form, which Larson says is the intelligent human being or humanoid. And at that point, that human being can be taken under the control of a sector 3 unit. Sector 3 is the unit that is really beyond space and time, or independent of space and time. Maybe you would say the origin of the space and time. Other ancient books or theories of everything may have called this God or the spirit world. Larson calls it Sector 3. And Sector 3 then kind of battles for control over the body with the Sector 2. Sector 2 unit is bent upon survival, whereas the Sector 3 unit is directed toward ethical behavior or good behavior. And so there are certain times where those two work at cross purposes, and there's a battle that's going on between Sector 2 and Sector 3 for control over the body. And that is basically mediated through the human being's free will. So that was the last chapter that we read here, chapter 17, that was called Free Will. And he basically, says, now we have confirmed the existence of free will, and we gained some understanding of the manner in which it is exercised. So now our next objective will be to examine the nature of the choices that are made. And the next 4 chapters will be devoted to this. So chapter 18 here is called Right and Wrong. Perhaps there are certain principles of right and wrong founded in the nature of things and in human nature, which, changing in their application from age to age, are yet permanent in their central meaning. And a very striking result of the addition of new items of scientific knowledge to those that were previously available is the way in which problems that had seemed hopelessly insoluble clear up as if by magic when they are examined in the light of the new information. So it was with many of the most recalcitrant problems of physical science when the reciprocal system was first developed. Long-standing questions in physics, in astronomy, in cosmology, some of which had been given up as impossible of solution, were suddenly found to be explainable in simple and logical terms. The same phenomenon is now being encountered in our exploration of the metaphysical realm. That is the Sector 3, or beyond space and time. In previous chapters, we have seen how the miraculous feats of inductive inference and the puzzling aspects of ESP experiments can easily be explained on a logical and purely scientific basis. Those are communications from Sector 3, ESP, inductive reason, inductive inference, intuition, scientific insight, religious revelation. Those are all communications from Sector 3. Now it is clear that the facts brought out in the preceding discussion also furnish an equally logical resolution to the age-old problem of right and wrong. Here is a problem that has occupied the thoughts of philosophers, of theologians, and of the common men, not only for centuries, but for millennia. Distinctions between right and wrong are continually being made by human beings, even by those who have persuaded themselves that such concepts are mere illusions. But the source of the criteria upon which the distinction is based is far from self-evident, and it has been the subject of endless debate and controversy. Now he's kind of going into a literature review. He talks about and quotes John Stuart Mill, and science has hitherto had nothing to offer in this area, as most of the scientists who have considered the matter freely admit. And he cites some other people, and then he says that philosophers have been no more successful in finding a solid basis for a system of ethics than the scientists. And in order to have anything at all to say on the subject, they've had to resort to some kind of arbitrary assumptions on which to base their reasoning. And in the ordinary course of events, if we encounter a problem, our first task is to devise a method by which to approach the question at issue. Then we apply this method, which may be nothing more than logical thinking about the problem, or may involve some very complicated procedures. And if the method turns out to be adequate for the purpose, we arrive at an answer. In the case of a reasonably simple question of right and wrong, on the other hand, we know the answer to begin with. And the problem with which we are confronted is to identify the means by which we obtained it. I have many times been uncertain. Oh, he's quoting this guy, Warren Weaver. There is little tendency to deny the validity of the answers that are obtained by this unknown process, even those who reject all of the religious explanations and regard ethical values as byproducts of social and scientific progress generally concede this point. I think we all know the essential values when we can think about them abstractly. The controversial issue is where and how this knowledge originates. The conclusion of this present work is that it is communicated to human beings from Sector 3 by a process variously termed revelation, insight, or intuition. Each level of existence has its own governing laws and principles, and although they differ materially in some very important aspects, each of these sets of laws and principles constitutes a self-consistent system. The ethical code is simply a portion of the system of rules which govern Sector 3. Okay, so now he's bringing up this ethical code, a portion of the system of rules which govern Sector 3. And the extension of that sector of existence into human life, level 3, as we have termed it. So a level 3 is a person who is under the influence of Sector 3. From this it follows that right is merely an abbreviation for in conformity with Sector 3 laws and principles, whereas wrong is a term that is applicable to anything that is in conflict with these laws and principles. A significant point in this connection is that those decisions which are commonly regarded as involving moral issues are decisions between only two alternatives. The issue in each case can be expressed as, is this right or wrong? In non-moral matters, there may be many choices. For example, if an individual has a sum of money available for spending, he has many alternatives, choices as to what to purchase, as well as the possibility of saving the funds for later use. On the other hand, the question as to whether a person should take advantage of an opportunity to acquire a sum of money by dishonest means is recognized by everyone as a moral issue. And here, as in moral issues in general, the choice is specifically between two alternatives, the two alternatives of right and wrong. Here we are dealing with a choice between two codes of conduct, two different sets of rules, not with the kind of decision that is involved in determining how one's money will be spent. So Larson really refers to that as an economic decision. An economic decision is one that has many different options. You know, you can go buy a candy bar, or you could go buy a piece of fruit, or you could, you know, go buy a beer or something. And all of those are, you know, economic decisions that you make. Now, they might have slight moral decisions in terms of, you know, whether they're good for you or bad for you. We'll say, if we were talking about, you know, you could buy a red shirt, you could buy a green shirt, or you could buy a blue shirt. Those are, and you could buy a white shirt, a black shirt. You know, you have all of these different options. But when it comes down to right and wrong, it's you have two choices, either right or wrong. The definition of right as conformity with the laws and principles of Sector 3 does not necessarily conflict with the religious doctrine that right means according to the will of God. The will of God, if it exists, can just as logically be expressed in the form of a set of laws and principles applicable to Sector 3 existence, in general, as in the form of a code by which to judge right and wrong directly. The present investigation does not resolve the issue as to the ultimate origin of the moral code, but it does advance the consideration of the matter by a few important steps. It shows that there is an intelligent existence outside space and time, which may have the characteristics attributed to it by the theologians. It shows that communications from this outside sector of existence can be and are received through the processes variously termed revelation, insight, etc. And it shows that the notions of right and wrong are based on the laws and principles governing the outside sector, transmitted to the human race by intuition and revelation and insight. In view of this substantial area of agreement, it must be conceded that the religious answer to the question of moral judgment, the question upon what principle do we discriminate between right and wrong, is consistent with the scientific findings herein presented. But this is likewise true of some different explanations, such as Immanuel Kant rejected the religious answer and advanced the contention that the moral code is an inherent endowment of our consciousness, part of a store of a priori knowledge that is available to us simply because we're rational beings. This is correct, but the reason why our status as rational human beings gives us the answers to moral questions is that human beings are in communication through intuitive channels with Sector 3, where the moral code originates. Theories based on ethical relativism, the system of thought which holds that there are no absolute standards of right and wrong, and that the proper criteria for ethical judgments vary with the culture involved and with the individual circumstances, are in direct conflict with the results of this investigation and must be rejected. So Larson flat out rejects ethical relativism. There is a right and there is a wrong. And they come from Sector 3, and there isn't this, oh, in a certain culture, this is okay, but in this culture, it's not okay. And they're both right. He rejects that. Okay, now support for ethical relativism stems largely from the observation that man's ideas of right and wrong depend to a considerable extent on the particular culture in which he lives. Religious prohibitions with respect to the eating of certain foods are frequently cited as an example. These prohibitions have the force of moral law for the believer, but they are meaningless to those who do not subscribe to the religious beliefs that are involved. From such items as this, the relativists have concluded that moral principles in general have no objective status, but derive their validity from the particular cultural setting in which they exist. The positivists and allied philosophical groups carry this argument even further and contend that the existence of so many conflicts and uncertainties in the various moral codes is sufficient evidence to show that there is no such thing as a definite standard of moral right and wrong. And then he cites A.J. Ayer, Richard von Mises, and one can point out in detail innumerable cases in which the uncertainty in the judgment of single ways of behavior contradicts the existence of an inborn norm common to all people. The second religious conception of the moral laws is invalidated by the fact that the allegedly revealed commandments are so vague and incomplete that their application requires continually new interpretation, which, after all, is a work of the intellect. So those are kind of positivist arguments. The weakness of the foregoing arguments can easily be seen by reference to the discussion in earlier chapters. As they're brought out, the moral codes promulgated by the religious authorities are by no means confined to the principles which the founders of the various religions formulated as a result of insight or revelation. Okay, it looks like we're out of time, so we can start back here when we resume next time. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.